Harmy, I don't know if you know, but it's the fourth clean sweep England have had over the West Indies. The last three, all in the 2000s, 2004 and a couple of years ago, and now once again. But it's a sign of how the power in the world game has changed. It was no surprise, to be absolutely honest. I think you called it about 6 months ago.
Yeah, and it's something that needs to happen to Sri Lanka as well. I don't think they're going to be the sort of strongest outfit. So England have to go and do exactly the same again. I wasn't surprised about how the West Indies were going to perform, because I thought the bowlers were their strength, and I think individually in patches they were good. I think collectively I don't think they were very good. One or two that I thought would stand up and be counted and, give England a real test in Alzari Joseph and Jason Holder. They weren't as, I think, at their best as what you would like them to be. But credit to England. Credit to England. Yes, the old cliche, you can only beat what's in front of you. This was a different England. This wasn't a reckless England. This wasn't an England who, all the Bazball talk of going out there and just, being, carefree and enjoy themselves and, champagne Charlies. I thought this was a ruthless England. I think this is an England with one eye on where they're going, and which is obviously Australia in 18 months' time, coupled with a tough series against India in between. I think this was a ruthless, ruthless England. And with a bowling attack now, which possesses 5 bowlers, it was really, really enjoyable to see how they went about their work over the course of the last month. I mean, there was tough passages. I can think of Brook and Root at Trent Bridge. I can think of 50 for 5 in this game. And yes, in times have gone by in Ben Stokes' era, England could have capitulated by just going even harder. But I really get a good sense of where this team's going now with the bowling attack that has injected pace. And the icing on the cake, he only got 2 wickets, and he was difficult on himself after Trent Bridge was Mark Wood, because he only got 2 wickets. One was a leading edge to sort of mid on after the effort he put in. But I think, as we all know, Manners, we all know cricket turns very, very quickly. If you keep putting the hard work in, keep putting the ball in the right areas, you will get your rewards. And I thought, that just wasn't pleasant, Manners. If I was a batter walking out there at the end of that game at Edgbaston, that just was no fun at all. It was like 94 mile an hour. You're going to hit me on the sort of tip of my toe, and you can't position yourself to go, right, I'm going to try and get forward. I'm going to try and get forward, because he can hit you on the head as well. So, it just didn't look pleasant whatsoever. It was brilliant to watch. It was breathtaking, to be fair, for that 5 or 6 overs. And that's the difference of what pace gives you. Broad Anderson, absolute champions, heroes, but once they were gone, it was, can we get pace into this side? Because that's what's going to take it to the next level, or to compete with the likes of Australia and India. And I'm encouraged where this team's going.
Mark Wood's final figures were 5 for 40, but the spell was 5 for 7 in 21 balls. And it reminded me of Dale Steyn. In Jacques Kallis's very last test match, Dale Steyn had none for 101. And India were 280 for 2 and cruising in complete control. And Steyn finished with 5 for 115. And South Africa went on to win. Talking of Jacques Kallis, do you know that he shares Ben Stokes' record now for... did you know that Jacques Kallis scored a Test 50 off 24 balls as well?
I would have said 124 balls.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Not 24. But I was in the hospitality units on I think on Friday, and one of the hospitality units, a lovely montage of Sir Garfield Sobers signed, and his career and his stats and everything like that. And the guy I was working with, Alan George from Gala, was like, "That's an amazing career, amazing here." And I was like, "Have you seen Jack Kallis's stats?" Jack Kallis he has to be the best of all time. He's got nearly 300 Test wickets, over 13,000 Test match runs. His one-day record's not too shabby either, and he stood at slip and caught 250 catches. He was an unbelievable player. Any given surface in any given country against any sort of variety of bowling attack. So, no, I'm not surprised that Callis got 50 off 24 balls. But he must have been shoved out the door very, very quickly to sort of get on with it, because it wasn't, I mean, the aggressive nature of Jacques Callis wasn't, always with his batting, or was he difficult to get out. I mean, in that 2005 series away, I mean, he just would not play a shot against anybody. It's like, come on, Jack, you awake in there. Never looked like getting him out, but he never looked like taking the game away from you. But I remember 5.5 hours, I think it was at Port Elizabeth, and he just blocked it. I mean, he just blocked it. He was an unbelievable player. But I'll say he could block it, he could hit it. But if anybody wants to understand what career numbers looked like, Ben Stokes, 6,000 test runs, 200 wickets. I mean, just have a look at Jacques Callis's. He's a great bloke, but what a cricketer.
And just for those of you who can't quite believe, it was against Zimbabwe at Newlands. Jacques Callis was facing an 18-year-old leg spinner called Graham Creamer, and he hit him for 4 sixes in 1 over, all straight back over his head. So that's how he managed. The two players who scored faster Test 50s in the history of the game, David Warner, one quicker, and you probably would have guessed that. But I bet you wouldn't guess the man who scored the fastest 50 in Test cricket. I won't let you try, because you'll need 200 guesses. Misbah ul Haq against Australia, 21 ball 50.
Yeah, another blocker as well, and somebody else who blocked it for a living. So, and another great player. I mean, came into the game late, didn't he? But I mean, no surprise on Warner. Somebody's going to get the fastest 100. Who's going to get the fastest 100? That was the talk on the commentary last night, and it's like, and I can't remember who was on, but they were 100% right. You take Joe Root out of the equation, but even Joe could do it. Joe Root out of the equation, any one of the other 6 batters in the top 7 of England could comfortably go out there, pick their bat up, first ball, hit it for 4 or 6, and go, I'm going to get the fastest 100, and then do it. Because I think Ben Stokes walked out yesterday morning, needing 82 to win, to go and right, I'm going to get the fastest 50. I'm going to make a big statement because of, and I mean, Ben's had a great week, I think. A great 3 weeks. He's captained the team very, very well. He's bowled brilliantly. And I know his numbers haven't shown, but he's bowled brilliantly. He's bowled really, 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 really well. He's held an end for his partners. He's attacked when aggressive into areas. His pace was up. I think Ben's bowled. I think he was the only one, like Mark Wood was due, a little bag of wickets. If Ben Stokes goes and gets 5 wickets against Sri Lanka, very first Test match, you'll see, what goes around comes around. Because I think Ben's bowled brilliantly this last 4 weeks. And like I said before, it's a great sign. We've now got five bowlers in an attack to challenge to take the world on.
Okay, and just the final 2 mentions. For anybody who thought this bloke's been, he's jumped the queue into the team, Jamie Smith. There were a few people going like, "What's he done? Why is he being shoved into the Test team?" He has, I think, provided enough evidence of why he's been fast-tracked. But how about Gus Atkinson? Now, he would have started the series just hoping for a game. And he's player of the series, taken 22 wickets in his first 3 Test matches. Has he convinced you? Is he? I mean, it's early days, and I know it's unfair to ask probably, but in the 3 Test matches, have you seen enough skill-wise, pace-wise, anything else-wise, to convince you that he could be in for a long-haul Test career?
Yeah, I think the only thing that's going to let Gus down is his body, like many other fast bowlers that we've got. I think his aggression into length is fantastic. He bowls that little bit fuller. He has got the bouncer in him, but I don't think he's as suited bowling the bouncer as Mark is or as Josh Tongue is. His pace was up throughout the Test series, which I was really encouraged by. Rewind 3.5 weeks. Gus Atkinson's been told by Rob Key, Brendan McCullum, you're going to play in the first Test match. He's probably just thinking 5 days. I just need to get through 5 days to prove that I can play Test match cricket, because I think in his eyes, and in many people's eyes, going into Lords, he probably was going into Lords to play Lords, miss Trent Bridge, and then play Edgbaston to see where he's at after being on tour with England in the winter. I think he's been excellent. He really has. And he's not only, yes, they've been shortened Test matches, but he's bowled his overs. He's bowled them with good pace. I mean, with excellent skill level. His lines and lengths are impeccable. And I think we are onto something, and it's just about keeping his body in tune to make sure that if he is, because he is, he's highly thought of as in white ball cricket and red ball cricket. I just wonder if England can potentially now go down the route of saying, and I said this to John Norman last night, it feels as though it's a start of something, because obviously Broad and Anderson have gone. I remember back in 2004, when we went to the Caribbean in Jamaica, first test match, it was the first time that Hoggard, Harmison, Flintoff, Jones and Giles bowled together in a test match. And then 18 months later, we played against the best team of all time in a 5 test match series and won the Ashes. I just wonder, with this variable attack that we've got now of Wokes, Atkinson, Wood, Stokes, Bashir, you throw in Jofra when he comes back next year, then you've got Tone, you've got Pennington, you've got Potts. I mean, I think we're onto something very, very good, because it's all about taking 20 wickets. Jamie Smith, I think, is a real find. He batted with Ben Stokes, I think, I'm not sure if it was Lords or at Trent Bridge. And they only put on about 30 or 40. But it was like, this is why he's in the team. His injection of pace coming in, and then he can go with a tail, as we've seen over the course of the 3 test match series. He's been a real find. But it's about taking 20 wickets. Always has. Test match cricket can't win if you don't take 20 wickets. And I think now we're starting to pull together a group of bowlers, which I'm very, very excited about, and that could potentially win home and away to balance out this explosive batting unit. I think England now, even though the West Indies weren't the greatest opposition, I think England are onto something special here. I really do.
You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, along with former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. Next up, we'll get the West Indies viewpoint on their series defeat, as their attention quickly turns to hosting South Africa in just about a week's time. You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, along with Double Ashes winner Steve Harmison. A reminder, you can also watch us now on YouTube. Just head over to the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel and subscribe. Right. Great friend of the programme, Machel St Patrick Hewitt from the brilliant Caribbean Cricket Podcast, reflects as he packs his bags heading out towards Trinidad for the first test match against South Africa on a series result that probably wasn't a great surprise, Mash. You know what was particularly disappointing is that the West Indies were really good at times. They had really good hours, didn't they? Sessions. Devon Hodges' century, I think I was bewitched by that. I thought it was a brilliant innings. But that's the whole point about Test cricket. They're not won in sessions, are they?
Yeah, I think at the highest level of Test cricket, it has a knack of finding out who's genuinely good versus who can be good in particular moments in time. And I mean, over the piece, was anyone really surprised it was England 3, West Indies 0? I think most sensible people would have predicted that's what would have happened before the series started. It was always, for me, going to be about, and particularly after Lords, it was always going to be about, could West Indies at least show they could be competitive versus England? And I guess not sell the pay-in public short. And ultimately, England themselves would have wanted a test. And I think I will always go back to this. Day 2 at Trent Bridge, West Indies were ahead in the first innings. I'm not saying that means they should have gone on to win. I'm just saying they were ahead in the first innings. Day 2 at Edgbaston, England were 55 for 5. And at that point in time, and they didn't take the review en route, at that point in time, West Indies were ahead of the game. I think everyone always loves to pivot back to Australia, so I'll pivot back to Australia. Australia in those positions don't let the pressure up. I don't think they let England go from 55 for 5. And one, they don't not take the review en route, but then they don't let England go from 55 for 5 to 300 and whatever it was they made, 87 or whatever it was they made in that first inning. So it's a weird one. In some senses, I'm glad that they showed they could be competitive after Lords, because I think people are quick to write them off after Lords and just assume, well, look at this inexperience, particularly in the batting side that have turned up. They clearly can't compete at the top level. They showed they can in sessions of play. Certainly not across a 3 to 5 day test match, call it what you want. And for England, I think England will be relatively, not maybe, Harvey's probably going to say very happy, but some questions were asked of England and they got through them. And this is, I think this can't be forgotten, right? That West Indies did pose some questions and England found the answers to those questions. Was it the high-level elite cricket that they're going to have to find answers for when they play the top sides? Possibly not, but you still have to answer the questions. And they did. Gus Atkinson has shown them that he may be the way forward. Mark Wood bowled. I thought he was tremendous at the back end at Edgbaston. In fact, I thought he was tremendous through the series, to be honest. Bashir will only have grown in confidence with the way that he's bowled in this series as well. Wolks, I think, has admitted himself that he was undercut going into the series. I think he came out the back end of it stronger. So Jamie Smith. So there's a lot of things here. I don't want us to get caught in that trap of saying, oh, well, you know, England, flat track, West Indies aren't that strong. I think they found some answers that they would have been looking for. And similarly, in someone like Kavem Hodge, West Indies will look at him and go, maybe we've found at least one top order bat who can show some grit and fight and make the most of his ability. So I guess that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, Mash, I think when you dissect what's happened throughout the series, I think when you look at it as a whole, you're right. I think nobody give the West Indies a prayer. But I think if I was a West Indies fan, I'd be encouraged by what I've seen. I think I've seen a more of a together West Indies team than I've seen for a number of years. Might not be up to the quality just yet. I think you're right. I think when you play against a top side and you play against a side who have got good experience, it comes down to moments at the end of day's play, and end of day 3, end of day 4 at Trent Bridge. The last session and each session, I mean, the West Indies went into each session in a good place and came out of it just because it was the last session, mentally, physically, probably tired. I think these are the areas, if I was coaching the West Indies, where we need to get better and get stronger. But there were positives. I mean, Machel Louis at the top. There's something there. I think the way Jaden Seals bowls. I said it last night on Following On. I've said it throughout, sort of in the hospitality boxes in Edgbaston. If I was a director of cricket in England with a pot of money next year, Jaden Seals was my first pick as an overseas bowler, because the West Indies don't play a great deal of Test match cricket. Yep. Not going on the franchise gravy train, and he runs in and gives everything. So I'll be encouraged by that. But there were a lot of positives of a team who I thought looked a team. Normally, Mash, when the West Indies turn up, they're a bit of a rabble. I mean, there's always a drama. I mean, off the field is causing a hell of a lot of tensions with on the field. But I didn't sense that with this group. I actually thought, you know what? From the captain walking out at the toss to the captain speaking at the end of a Test match, there's a unit here, and surely that unit can be built on.
Do you know, that's a good point, Harmy, and it raises a pertinent question as to having identified, because obviously going into this series, Louis was on debut, Afanase, Mackenzie, Hodge haven't played many Test matches between them, etc. They have to make a decision. Like, there's no use now just chopping and changing. If this is the core that you have identified, Louis is 23, Afanase is 25, Mackenzie is 23. Not sure about Mackenzie. Mackenzie's 23, Hodge is 31, but obviously new to the scene. If this is the core you are going with, go with the core and commit yourself to saying, right, we've got South Africa up next, no chopping and changing, off you go. Bangladesh at the end of the year, Pakistan at the start of next year. In an ideal world, if you're moving anybody, you're moving one piece out of the unit. I don't expect or don't want to see that a year from now, the entire top 6 is completely changed again, because what is that achieving? So I agree with you, but only if they commit themselves to they're young, they're inexperienced, they're on a developmental process, and let's keep working with them, let's keep going with them. So yes, you are right if that is the long-term plan.
I completely agree with Harmy's observation about this team looking like a group of men who wanted to be there together from different backgrounds, different countries, different cultures. But they, you know, and Kevin Hodge, he's been playing first-class cricket in, let's be honest, you know, often arduous conditions and circumstances for very little money for a dozen years, waiting for the call-up. to play international cricket. 12 years he's played cricket. And so this idea that, there aren't the West Indian cricket are all the best players, just want to get onto the T20 gravy train, and it's nonsense. It's not. There may be less players, but this is a very talented group of players. Guys like Alzarri Joseph choosing to play Test cricket. He could make a living on the T20 circuit. Jason Holder said on this very program over 2 years ago, when he just turned 30, he said, my priorities are going to change. I think the age of 30 is a good time to start cashing in on my ability. I'm going to play more franchise cricket. There he is again, trying to hold things together with bat and ball, a couple of months short of his 33rd birthday. And I'm sounding frustrated because my frustration is aimed at the I guess the big three, the game's international administrators. There are plenty of men, and mostly men, to play Test cricket, but men and women who want to play cricket in the Caribbean. They just need to be a bit better rewarded. A couple of years ago, Mash, the guys were being paid $400 to play a 4-day game, $100 a day. And yet, they want to play Test cricket. And I know that they were beaten 3-0, but I don't think Test cricket, if it dies and fades out in the Caribbean, it won't be because of the players. It'll be because of administrative greed. Rant over.
Yeah, no, I don't see anything wrong with that particular statement. And I think you and Hartme ultimately are both right in that the players are there. I think the next time West Indies, what will be interesting is, so West Indies and England don't play again in terms of Test cricket within this Future Tours program. The next time we probably lock horns will be in 2028, you would imagine, whether it be in the Caribbean or whether it be in England. And it'll be very interesting to me to see what the state of play is then. Because somebody like a Mikhail Louis has the game to probably play T20 cricket if he so wanted. Alec Athanaze, they certainly want him to play some of the white ball stuff in the ODIs and T20s. And it'll be very instructive if these youngsters who we've now identified, like say Louis 23, Athanaze 25, let's see if they're still around in 4 years' time. They've got the talent, obviously, but let's see if they're still playing Test cricket in 4 years' time. And that will be very instructive to see what is the world game. Where are we going? Because we can't just keep finding the next set of 23-year-olds and say, well, the others have all gone off to T20 cricket. Now let's build with this lot, if you see what I mean. But 4 years from now, Athanaze will be 29 years old. He's supposed to be the experienced pro at that point, driving the next generation of West Indies cricketers. So it'll be very instructive to see where we're at by the time England and West Indies next lock horns.
And going into the South Africa series, Mash, you look at Alzarri Joseph, was he the disappointment of what you expected? You're probably coming over here. I said at the start, you're probably coming over here with 5 players of, I think, Test match standard, proper to go against England. And one of the higher ones was definitely Alzarri, who, I mean, he was a bit hit and miss. Is it just a case of he needed some overs under his belt and he goes into that South African series, hopefully on home soil, familiar surroundings, and with them overs under his belt, he'd be the man you look to lead to try and beat South Africa?
There's a lot of scrutiny of Alzarri Joseph at this moment in time in the Caribbean. Many believe he should be much further ahead in his development in Test cricket than he currently is. I like that phrase, hit or miss. That I think that sums him up. Last year, when we went to South Africa, Alzarri Joseph took 12 wickets at 18 apiece in South Africa on admittedly bouncier, harder, truer wickets. But you're not going to be able to play on those wickets your whole career, right? You've got to be able to adapt. You've got to be able to show that you can bowl in. And England shouldn't be completely out of his comfort zone. He's been here many times. This is, I think, 4th tour of England. And at this point, with respect to Jayden Seales, who I think is a fantastic talent, Jayden Seales shouldn't be better than Alzarri Joseph at this point in time. Jayden's just reached his 50th Test match wicket after 13 tests. Alzarri reached 100 wickets after 35 tests. That shouldn't be the case. Alzarri should have been further along in his red ball journey and skill set than he is right now. And I think what that shows, Harmy, ultimately is that West Indies missed Kemar Roach on this tour because they needed a senior pro who knows the conditions, would know what line and length to bowl when under the pump and under pressure. And I think some, like Alzari, buckled a bit under the pressure, whereas Kemar Roach's nous possibly would have helped this bowling attack at times to just gain some kind of control back. So I guess fundamentally it's a culmination of what happens when, if you're not developing at the pace you should be, but there's no pressure on your spot, you end up being hit or miss.
I've got to wrap it up here, Mash, but just before we do, it's amusing to me in some ways that South Africa are going to be played at Trinidad and Guyana. They are two spinner venues, if ever there were. I thought Gudakesh Motie was the West Indies' best bowler, actually, in the two test matches that he played. Who is the second spinner? And also, South Africa have basically only got Keshav Maharaj, really. I mean, it's going to be. I think there was maybe a nod to South Africa's pace attack, and when they allocated those two venues. But then Heinrich Nortje stepped away from Test cricket, and South Africa rested Marco Jansen. So it's really just Kagiso Rabada. So who's the second spinner?
It's going to be very interesting. It would have been Kevin Sinclair if Mark Wood hadn't broken his arm, I think, or wrist or whatever it is that he's broken. It would have been Kevin Sinclair. So that warm-up game that West Indies are playing, South Africa are playing against essentially the next best 11 in the West Indies, it'll probably Trinidadian called Brian Charles, who possibly gets the call. And just to answer your question, yes, I think it is deliberate that these South Africa tests have been moved to Trinidad and Guyana. The last time South Africa came, it was played in St. Lucia, which basically suited South Africa down to the ground. So I think we may have learned. I think we may have learned from that error of judgment and moved it to the most spin-friendly tracks in the Caribbean and said to South Africa, "Let's see how you deal with low and slow." So we shall see. So, like I said, I think it'll be a guy called Brian Charles, but we wait to see. But that will be an intriguing test because South Africa haven't played obviously since New Zealand, and West Indies obviously are coming off the back now of 3 tests back to back, which is probably the best test preparation they could have had before playing South Africa. So we shall see how that one unfolds.
Machel St Patrick Hewitt from the brilliant Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Always a pleasure to chat to you, mate. Have a great trip to Trinidad and have a wonderful time there.
I will try.
You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, along with former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. And if you have missed any of the show and you want to catch up, you know what to do. Download the podcast from the Following On feed, available via the free talkSPORT app or wherever you get your podcasts. Palmer, you called it straight after the World Cup, saying that Andrew Flintoff, I know you don't have to always qualify your comments by clarifying that you are friends with Fred, but you did say that he was, in your mind, worthy of serious consideration should Matthew Mott not renew his contract or be asked to leave prematurely. And that is a narrative that's gaining momentum, isn't it?
It seems to be. I'm not sure on this one. I really am. I've not spoke to Andrew about it. I wished him all the best for the Superchargers game, his first game in charge, which sounded like an absolute debacle, trying to get players. I think I would imagine at one point he was nearly playing, because I think there was, planes, trains, and automobiles, absolute nightmares. And there was a few articles wrote off the back of it, saying that he lost his first game in charge, and I think it had nothing to do with coaching. Why they lost they just didn't have a team. So you look at the Superchargers now, when they're going to have Stokes, Brook, Pennington, Potts when he's not still on the ear one, Purran in his own kit. That looks a strong side. I would imagine he'd been questioning his decision to go into coaching about 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon when he was looking around the dressing room when there was more support staff than there were players there. So does he replace Matthew Mott? I think it's a hard job that now. I really do think that's a hard job. It's a rebuild job. Who else is out there from a coaching point of view that England could bring in? I'm not saying Andrew gets it because he's the only man, but he's been in that dressing room. He understands probably what needs to change, understands what was potentially going wrong. And also there's an involvement of the group. I mean, you look at some of the players that are going to leave that white ball side, some absolute greats above game, white ball cricket, multiple World Cup winners. But I think it is a rebuild job, and it's, do you go down the route of trying to get an experienced coach in from the outside, or the way white ball seems to be going, the way franchise seems to be going? Yes, some of these icons are good coaches, but it's about mentoring. It's about the environment, and it's about making sure that you come into the dressing room and make it a happy place for you to really sort of fulfill your skill sets. It's not about coaching somebody to hit, technique or anything like that. Because I mean, if you're having to coach somebody's technique at England level, I mean, the selectors want shot for picking the wrong players. So I wouldn't have a problem Andrew going as head coach. I wouldn't have a problem with Owen Morgan going as head coach. I said it in Holland all them years and months back that, don't let Owen Morgan leave this dressing room. Have him as coach. He's the obvious man. And you mentioned it before we started the show, man. Owen Morgan's coached this white ball team for 5 years. He has. He was the man in charge. And I think that's the big one as well, is if you go down the road of, right, giving it to Flintoff, what do you do with the captain? Because the captain has to be the driver and force of the team. He has to have what he needs, and he's going to have to rebuild this unit. You're going to have some young players who you're going to have to mold. And do you then, for me, I wouldn't take Butler away as captain. I would take the gloves away from him, definitely, and say, right, you are now on a cycle of 2.5, 3 years to get these World Cups, to get to the next 50 over World Cup, and you're going to build a unit along with Andrew Flintoff, and you're going to build a unit of how we're going to play, and we'll identify, the game plans we set. We'll identify what players, fit well for this group, and then you go and take them on, like Owen Morgan did. I'm not sure Josh Butler's up to Owen Morgan when it comes to the sort of the leadership qualities, but you've got to give somebody some responsibility. And I think now the likes of Mo and Ali going, Adil Rashid probably will go eventually. Root's gone, Stokes is gone, Mark Wood probably goes, Chris Wokes probably goes. All these players who are multiple World Cup winners, and there's probably a few more, they have to be replaced. And I think it needs, two men who get on really, really well, in sync together. And if that's Flintoff and Butler, the ticket to go forward, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Two iconic figures. Best player that's ever played the game in white ball cricket to lead it, and the most charismatic, infectious character that you could possibly have in a dressing room and fronting it, then I think it would be a good ticket. But it sounds like, because of the noise, that Matthew Mott's gone, and England do need another coach.
I just want to make the point, Harmy. It's an obvious one, but it's worth making again. A coach is only as good as the men and women around him. So he's or she is only as good as his or her team. So it's not got nothing to do with Andrew Flintoff that Mitchell Santner was still playing Major League Cricket, or that Nicholas Pooran was in the air on a transatlantic flight less than 24 hours before the Northern Superchargers' first game. And there are analysts, and there are videographers and managers and logistics people. They need to do their job. It's not, I mean, you are not exaggerating. I just want to make that clear to the viewers and listeners that 3 hours before that game started against the Trent Rockets, Andrew Flintoff didn't have 11 players. Never mind 13 or 14. He had 9, didn't he? He was too short. 3 hours before the start of the game. That's pub 11 stuff.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I think that SOS to Michael Jones, who didn't have a Superchargers contract. He was playing. He was obviously up in Durham. He was preparing for a game. I think it was at Worcester. Preparing for a game. It was literally trying to phone people. Matt Potts got stuck on the M1. Dylan Pennington wasn't allowed to leave because England still needed the concussion substitute just in case. So. There was a couple of articles written. Like Matt Rollo wrote one on ESPN. It was a good article. It was, his facts were 100% correct. I think there was a little bit of dig of, giving Flintoff the coach's job over possibly somebody else who has got coaching experience. But I think when you look at it, and in the grand scheme of things. I'm not sure what, other than actually play himself, I'm not sure what Andrew Flintoff was thinking about 2 hours before the game. But hey, again, I come back to the fact that the Superchargers, I'm not the 100's biggest fan. I think the first 3 games in the 100 this year, if you're trying to sell the 100 and you're trying to, push Test cricket to one side, I know where my money was this week. And my money was watching Mark Wood. My money was watching Ben Stokes play probably better cricket than the 100 than it was watching them first 3 games, which were a complete mismatch, complete shockers. 4th game was very good. I'll give that. And then obviously the Superchargers game wasn't the sort of best spectacle. I think the 100 needs to pick its game up when it comes to the product on the field, because I've always been a fan of the product on the field because of it's the best playing against the best. I look at this at this moment in time and I'm looking around that field and going, some of the body languages, no tribalism, not playing for, Sean Abbott was playing for Surrey in a Blast game, trying to win the championship for Surrey. And then on the opening night playing against the Oval Invincibles at the Oval for Birmingham. And trying to get yourself not motivated, but where your allegiance lies and everything that goes with it. I think the 100 is in a precarious position at this moment in time. And when you've just seen England Test cricket play the way they have done, the way Ben Stokes is leading a group of blokes in 3 Test matches, I think my money would. If I had, even though I was trying to entice new people towards the game, I would have took them to Lords, I'd have took them to Trent Bridge, and I'd have took them to Edgbaston every single time to watch this England Test team play over any 100 game. And I've been consistent. I'm not a big fan of the 100, but I know it's got to exist and I know it's got to stay. And I'm not knocking it. I'm just judging it on what it's been this year so far. I'd much rather watch Ben Stokes' team in white rather than any of the teams, with Chris Packett names on the front of their shirts.
I think there are 2 things that stuck out for me. That the proliferation of second choice Australian cricketers in the 100. They, like all the big names, are playing Major League Cricket. And how about Alex Lees being booed by the Headingley crowd because he's playing for the Trent Rockets? I think the 100's got to do some serious introspection. And finally, Harmy, you might comment on this in part 4, but we have criticised the big 3 playing nations, the big 3 Test playing nations, for not doing enough to help the smaller nations. Well, pat on the back to the ECB Chief Executive Richard Gould, who confirmed this week that Zimbabwe will receive a touring fee in 2025 next year, in what he calls their responsibility to maintain the strength of bilateral cricket. The last time Zimbabwe toured England, the players were paid so poorly, Zimbabwe players were paid so poorly, that they tried to keep their daily allowances. And I saw, and a couple of these guys, I saw players staying in their 5-star hotel in London, picking up the silver domes off room service trays to see what was left over outside other people's rooms in order to save their $50 a day. So
scary, isn't it?
That's true story.
Yeah.
True story.
Very scary.
One of those players now works in county cricket. He knows who he is, and you probably do as well. Okay, you're listening to Following On with me, Neil Manthorp, along with Durham Hall of Famer Steve Harmison. Next up, we'll discuss a couple of new recruits for Durham and also history for Sri Lanka's women. You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, along with Double Ashes winner Steve Harmison. And a reminder, you can now watch us on YouTube. If you're not doing that already, just head over to the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel and subscribe. Delighted to say, as promised at the top of the show, we're joined live by Mark Machado, co-host of the Murali Pod, which is extremely popular and well listened to. The Murali Pod, if you're not familiar with it, make sure you subscribe or at least find it. We're going to talk, Mark, about Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's women stunning India to win the Asia Cup for the first time. Half centuries from Chamari Attapattu and Hartita Samarawikrama chased down 166. No small target there, with 8 balls left to beat the India women. And I think it's, I mean, fair to say, obviously, it's a historic achievement. The women's game has not perhaps received all the support it might have done in Sri Lanka over the years. Is this a turning point?
Yeah, absolutely. I really hope so. So what happened is, after kind of coming out of COVID, the women's team actually kind of disappeared for a little while, and it was almost through kind of public pressure and various people online kind of kept asking where the Sri Lanka women gone, where have they gone, where have they gone, where have they gone. I think it put a bit of pressure on SLC to not just kind of sort out some fixtures for them and get them playing cricket again, but actually to kind of invest in it a little bit. And you know, I don't want to come on here and praise SLC too much, because obviously, you know, we know it can be flawed, but actually they've ended up putting a bit of money into it, putting in some really high quality coaches, and now we're kind of reaping the rewards and the benefits. It's brilliant.
But before we come on to the game, what about the crowd? I mean, the crowd was massive. I mean, I sat with John Norman and during at Edgbaston. And he was like, he put the game on, and he was like, "How many have you seen this?" I was like, I couldn't believe what I was watching. It was a huge crowd, and is that again, we've seen in the women's 100 off the back of the men's game, the crowds have been substantial. This is a standalone event. I mean, the crowd was massive. Is that another sign that the trajectory of where the women's game's going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the SLC took a bit of a risk by playing this tournament in Dambulla, which I don't know how much time you guys have spent in Sri Lanka, but it's kind of I would kind of say it's kind of the middle of nowhere, right? It's about an hour and a bit away.
It's a bit like the northeast of England.
Yeah. I said no. It'd be the equivalent of having a stadium in the Lake District, right?
Yeah.
I think so. They took a bit of a risk doing it, but the two things worked in their favour. They gave out tickets. All the tickets were free, even for the final. At no point did they resist the temptation to put any sort of price on it. And also, Charbury, our kind of hero in the whole thing, is actually from the local area as well. So I think that kind of might have galvanised the people. But the thing is, above all else, Harvey, Sri Lanka, we just love cricket. And any sort of cricket that's played there, if you get a bit of momentum behind it, people will come and watch it. And the culture in it is more akin to kind of what football is in Europe in terms of spectating the sport. I mean, there's always loud music. The crowd are really behind it. We'll create that atmosphere. The teams will congratulate the opposition sides when they do good stuff as well. I mean, in terms of the impact this whole tournament's had in the women's game in Sri Lanka, I think it's going to be exponential. It's going to be incredible. I'm excited to see what happens next.
It would help the women's game in Sri Lanka if there were. I mean, Chamari Attapattu is. I mean, she's obviously a role model, and she's a superstar. But I was surprised that she didn't get a 100 contract. I mean, a little bit more high-profile recognition of some of these players might help the game grow and inspire younger girls.
Yeah, so actually, she is going to come over and play a few games with the Oval Invincibles. I think there is a slight issue with this, right? So obviously, the Asian Cup finished yesterday. They're going to play Ireland in that Super League type tournament. That starts, I think, on the 10th or 11th of August. So she's got about 10 days now, but to get herself over to England, maybe play 2 or 3 games for the Invincibles, and then go and play Ireland. What I really want to see, though, is I really want to see the other players start to get franchise contracts. I think it's a bit. It feels to me as a Sri Lanka fan that can be a bit of a closed shop in terms of. I mean, I think this is true in the men's game as well. In terms of if you're South African, if you're Australian, if you're English, you're more likely to get those big franchise contracts above anyone else. Then it feels like maybe the West Indian and the Sri Lankan players might get a look in, but they always have to be exceptional. What I've seen with the men's side, and even with someone like Charbury, as she's been going around and playing all these other different franchise leagues, she's working with different coaches, she's working in different teams, and you can see her kind of experience grow. I think if Sri Lanka women's team were to take the next step up and get to that top table and stick about, and wins against India and Australia and England become more regular, then I think we're going to have our best players beyond Charbury playing in these big leagues as well. So yeah, I'd love for the WPL and the Big Bash to take a closer look at some of these girls.
Mark Machado, co-host of the Murali Pod. Right, we've only got a couple of minutes left, Harmy. As always, we're running out of time. Bits of news that have come to my attention. Warwickshire captain Will Rhodes will join Durham at the end of the season or beginning of next season. Durham also linked with opener Emilio Gay. Now, what's going on with the shopping spree? I thought Durham's squad was pretty well stocked.
Yeah, it has been pretty well stocked. There has been a lot of rumours talking about players coming in. I think probably a bowler as well that Durham will be looking for. Emilio Gay, I think, has been talked about Durham for the majority of the season, but I think he'll be sought after by quite a few. The Will Rhodes one was a left field one. I didn't expect that. I didn't see that coming. But I would imagine someone like Michael Jones would be moving on. He did excellent for Scotland in the World Cup. I think his chances have been, curtailed. We've got a kid called Ben McKinney, who only got a few runs yesterday against Worcester. And yes, I'm quite happy that players are coming in and giving competition, but I don't want them to stand in the way of some of our good young talent. And I think young McKinney is going to be he's going to be a very, very good player, along with a left arm, a 16-year-old made his debut yesterday at Worcester, on Sunday at Worcester, called James Minto, who's got pace. I've seen him since he was 11 years old. I mean, he was bowling I reckon he was bowling 75 mile an hour when he was 11. He was scarily quick for 11-year-olds. And I think he's got a pathway to get through as well. So as much as there's players coming in from outside, I think Durham have to look after their own and try and fast track them through. Scott Borthwick's had an indifferent year. Durham captain, but I would imagine he's not going nowhere. So there might be a few changes, but I think Durham will be looking like they did last year with Ackerman, looking to strengthen their side rather than sort of deplete it too much.
Okay, Kane Williamson and Chris Wokes are set to play in the SA20 for the Durban Supergiants. And that follows reports that Joe Root and Ben Stokes will also play there. A couple of other bits of news. Charlie Castle, Scotland bowler, registered the best ODI figures on debut, taking 7 for 21 against Oman to beat Kagiso Rabada's record of 6 for 16 against Bangladesh on debut. That was in 2015. Imagine that. Ben Kellaway, Glamorgan spinner, took wickets bowling left arm and right arm spin in the win over Surrey in the One Day Cup this week. Reminds me, Bob Woolmer, as you know, I was great friends with him. He said 25 years ago, the next innovation in cricket will be ambidextrous infielders. So as in close fielders who could throw with right and left arm. That still hasn't happened. I know it's more difficult than we make it sound, but spinners, he's not the first, Ben Kellaway. There's been a couple now who've bowled left arm spin and right arm spin. But it's time to move on to the final word, Harmy. And this week, well, I mean, we could give it to Ben Kellaway. I mean, that's a great story, isn't it? Imagine, did you ever think about bowling left arm quick? No, sorry, we haven't got time for that.
I struggle to bowl right arm quick and land it sometimes.
The final word this week. I don't know if you know about this story. Zimbabwe keeper Clive Madandi conceded a world record 42 first innings byes on his test debut against Ireland. That was a test match so full of incident. Andy McBride ran a 5, a cover drive out to the boundary. Fielder chased after it, hopped over an advertising hoarding, and never reappeared. So they kept running. He ran 5. Ireland's lead on the first innings was 40, and poor old Clive Madandi conceded 42 first innings byes. Some of them were terrible. They should have been called wide. They were down the leg side, and he couldn't lay a glove on them. But you know,
wood bowl.
Do you know what makes it? I mean, poor old Clive Madandi. I know he's a talented cricketer, and he's had a very, very bad day there. But I just think it's wonderful that Ireland and Zimbabwe are playing this test match, and it means the world to the players, Harmy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't understand how Ireland haven't played 4 test matches this summer. 1 against the West Indies, 2 against Zimbabwe, 1 against Sri Lanka. That's a summer calendar test match cricket along with the white ball stuff. I mean, I'll say this we've been saying it now, Manners, for 2 or 3 years. You know, the smaller nations being used as warm-ups for the main test teams to get ready for their main test tour. It doesn't make sense. So to have Zimbabwe, Ireland playing against each other, even though there's no eyes watching it on TV, because it's not on TV anywhere, which is a shame. But it's great to see. Test cricket is not about the big 3, about they're all corners of the world, and Zimbabwe and Ireland are, Zimbabwe's got a huge history of Test match cricket with some of the fantastic players they've produced, and Ireland are on the start of it. So I'm pleased they're playing, but I think we could help them out so much better. And also the Richard Gould story, when he sat down the Test match to say they're going to give a fee to Zimbabwe. It's the start. It's the start of something that has to happen more and more, and fingers crossed it does. Because countries like Zimbabwe and Ireland and Sri Lanka, they all need the financial resources to help sustain what is a great game of Test cricket.
And an honorary mention to the Jolland family, who fielded an entire 11 for Newmarket midweek seconds against Thurlow and Old Mill Greenians seconds in Division 5 of the Haverhill and District Midweek Cricket League. Jimmy played alongside brothers Mark and Nick and their sons, Henry, Freddie, George, Nick's sons Jack and Archer, Mark's son Ryan, and nephews Brandon and Daniel. Absolutely amazing. Jimmy's dad, Stephen, was also the umpire. That's a wonderful, happy story you've been listening to. Following on here on talkSPORT with me, Neil Manthorp, along with former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. And if you've missed any of the show and you want to catch up, you know what to do. Download the podcast from the Following On feed, now available via the free talkSPORT app. We'll be back at the same time or a similar time next week with lots and lots of more news and stories. This has been Following On
AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.